So we'll start with today's topic is honesty and non-lying. As always, we'll be referring to Master Choa's books only. We'll be using three books again today. Uh, First book is Level 1 book, The Ancient Science and Art of Pranic Healing. The second book that we'll be using today is Achieving Oneness with the Higher Soul. And as always, my favorites, Lotus Sutras. The one we are using today is Compassionate Objectivity. This one is also an old version. I actually have three different versions of the same book. Okay, so before we start, again, a reminder, why are we doing what we are doing? So this is part of our series on character building. The reason why we do that is given by Master Choa in this book, Achieving Oneness with the Higher Soul, page 223, if anybody is following. When you do meditations, you have to practice character building. Without it, there is a tendency to become worse. Why? After you have had a good meditation, you feel blissful. But after 2 or 3 days, have you not experienced getting angry or being in a bad mood? I'm not sure how many of us have gone through this or experienced this. If you want to try it, meditate every day and see what happens. I guarantee you that you will all hit a point where you will see this happening. I have. My thing was irritation and anger, and it was very kindly pointed out by my wife on WhatsApp. So that was good fun. But why does this happen? Meditating regularly is like being fertilized. Throw the fertilizer on the ground, and whatever is in the ground, either good or bad seeds, will grow. Everything, whether vice or virtue, is magnified. Unless a person in the spiritual path practices character building, he or she may tend to become worse. So that's the reason. We are about to do meditation on twin hearts, which is part of spiritual practice, which brings down tremendous amount of energy, which, as Master Choa says, is like a fertilizer. So we use this opportunity, the 20 minutes or so in every session, to make sure that we actively work on removing our vices and building virtues. Virtues and vices, as per Master Choa, is defined in the framework that he has put in front of us is 5 virtues. And for everything, we practice the yang and yin, which is do the wholesome thing and avoid the unwholesome things. So far we have talked about loving kindness and generosity, and today we will talk about generosity, about honesty and non-lying. Okay, so I will stick with the same book right now, but I'll just skip a few pages ahead to the topic of honesty and non-lying, which is page 231. Master Choa actually uses the term accurate perception and correct expression and non-falsehood for this virtue. And within that, there are many sections, 7 as per this book. We'll be talking about the first one here, which is honesty and non-lying. Just like loving kindness, it is important to understand that when we're talking about honesty and non-lying, it is to others and to ourselves. It's not just about other people, but we have to make sure we are being honest and we are not lying to ourselves. Okay. I'll read from the book now. Honesty and non-lying. There are different levels of honesty. Practice the mature type of honesty towards other people and towards yourself. Do not lie to yourself. If you want to understand very deep spiritual teachings, or if you want to develop sharpness and clarity of mind, you must practice honesty towards other people and yourself. This is very important. Why? When a person lies or fools other people, he generates the negative karma of distorting perception of other people. Consequently, his own perception will be distorted. This is why when he is presented with a simple truth, he cannot understand it. Understanding truth under such conditions is just not permissible. Why? Because the person keeps on lying. So that's one key reason of why do we need to develop this virtue? Why do we need to practice honesty and non-lying? And the answer is given here in very simple terms, that when we are not doing that, when we are trying to knowingly or unknowingly lie to others, deceive others, try and be manipulative, what we are trying to do is we are stopping other people from seeing things as they are. We are distorting their perception, trying to get them to believe something which is completely different. And the repercussion of that is that the same will happen to us. I mean, we have talked about golden rules of giving and receiving. You've talked about law of karma. A lot of people do not are not comfortable with the law of karma, so we can talk about cause and effect. So if the cause that we are generating or creating is about distorting other people's perception of things, the same will happen to us. And that's one of the very key reasons of why this needs to be practiced. In very practical terms, sharpness of mind, if you want to develop that, and if you look at who is an intelligent person, who is a sharp person, somebody who's able to look at the facts, look at the picture in front of him or her, and get a very clear perception of, okay, what exactly is happening there? What is the path that needs to be taken? What is the problem at hand? What are the key things that need to be solved? And that is effectively what sharpness of mind is. But if the person cannot see properly on what's happening, and he or she is always confused, then there's a problem. And that is effectively his own perception getting distorted, and hence a key reason of why practice it. There was one word with Master Choa use, and he uses always whenever he's talking about practicing honesty, is that he talks about practicing a mature kind of honesty. So in the school of pranic healing and Adhatik yoga, we are always discouraged from being fanatic about things. And there's so many stories that we come across where people are trying to be virtuous, but they're not really. So take an example, right? I mean, I remember two or three examples that Master Cho has talked about mature kind of honesty. Let's say, unfortunately, if you end up being at the receiving end of a burglary, and somebody comes in your house and say, "Hey, can you tell me where are all your valuables?" Then you can say, "Hey, I need to practice honesty. So, okay, let me just tell you, this is my safe, these are my valuables, this is the code, go for it, because I'm not supposed to lie." I mean, that is plain and simple stupid, right? And that's when, but as per Master Choa and as per common sense, this is not where you practice honesty to the full extent. You do not go ahead and practice honesty in a form that it harms you or it harms others. So this is where discernment or accurate perception is super important. And maybe next week or the week after, we'll talk a lot about this specifically. There's so much material available in Master Choa's teachings, because he always wants his disciples to be very, very sharp with respect to discernment, not believe anything, not act blindly on certain things. And this is what we'll talk about a lot of times. But that's one good example of mature kind of honesty. There's another example, which was a lot of people think of truth and lie as binary, right? Either you're lying or you're not lying. But I think it is very important to see that there are various facets of truth. And we'll talk about this in one of the books actually here. Now, yeah, okay. So there's an example given that, let's say, if there's an old woman and her son dies, and you have to give that information to her, but you know that her son had joined a terrorist organization, went ahead killing many, many people, and he died in the police encounter. Now, do you want to go back to an 80, 90-year-old woman and tell her all this, or is it kinder to go ahead and simply say that, hey, your son died in an accident or passed away, and not give her all the details? That's again a very good example of a mature kind of honesty. You do not want to be in a situation where you give all the details because you want to be honest. You have to use your own judgment, you have to use discernment and practice that. And that's where the teachings are really, really beautiful, because they give you a practical way of working rather than a very rigid structure on, hey, do this, do that. Because the other thing which Master Choa talks about is that we need to balance honesty with loving kindness. And for that, actually, I'll again go back to the book. It's very nicely said in the book. Just give me 1 second. Level 1 book. Now, I'm at the very end. In my book version, it is page 290, but it's the discussion on the 5 virtues. Honesty and non-lying. Honesty should be practiced in such a way that it will not harm or injure others. One should not use honesty or frankness as a tool or weapon to cause emotional pain or injury. Honesty should not be used out of malice. This is misusing the virtue of honesty. If there's a conflict between the virtue of honesty and virtue of kindness and non-injury, the virtues of kindness and non-injury should prevail over honesty. Non-lying means that one should not make untrue or false statements out of malice or with the intent of taking advantage of other people. Uh, Again, a very nice reminder not to be fanatic about truth telling, not to be fanatic about using this virtue. I'm not sure if you guys have experienced it. I have experienced it loads of times where people use the virtue of honesty and non-lying as a weapon. I'm going to just tell you how things are. I don't care how you feel about it. That's just the way it is. And we come across so many people who genuinely believe that for some reason it is their duty to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, and it doesn't matter what the consequences are. Okay, if people make mistakes, but no, I want to point out your mistake. I want to point out exactly how badly you did. I want to tell you exactly what the consequences were, and I want to question your basic existence and how you are. Why? Because I'm practicing the virtue of honesty. I'm trying very hard not to take personal examples, which is fun, but it just reminded me of my father. Good fun. And Master Choa very rightly points out, and that's what I like about the framework which is given to us. That okay, you have talked about the virtue of loving kindness and honesty, and the guideline is very simple. If there's a conflict between the two, then loving kindness always prevails. So if your words are going to be harmful, if they're going to hurt somebody emotionally, and mostly if they are not even that important or that necessary, you don't need to practice this. Be quiet. Being quiet sometimes is one of the best things to do. And we absolutely should think about this in our thoughts, words, and speech. And everything, whenever we are talking about these expressing ourselves, it's about our words, it's about our thoughts, it's about our actions. So just zipping it is not enough. We need to control our thoughts as well. So if we don't have positive or kind thoughts about other people, there is no need to be honest about it. Okay, some mental criticism, continuous mental criticism, we learned in the virtue of loving kindness, it's actually violence. So just because somebody is, polite word, acting in a not very intelligent fashion, let's go with it that way, then you don't need to think about that again and again. You don't need to think about how this person is, how, okay, you saw that action, you realize that, okay, he or she could have acted differently. If they're not able to understand something, maybe they're not the smartest tool, whatever. Once, if you notice that once, if you think about that once, that's observation. If you obsess over it, that is simply mental criticism and mental violence. We need to stop that. That is not practicing honesty. If you tell that person again and again that, I mean, what's wrong with you? It's not helpful. It is not practicing the virtue of honesty, and it just doesn't work. An example came to my mind. A friend of mine did this beautiful thing. I have no idea why he did that. But for some reason, he went to his sister and said, "Hey, you have put on a lot of weight. You look fat. You should exercise. Otherwise, it's not good for you." Okay. Point made. Sister is unhappy, as any woman would be. But then he was staying with her for more than 2 weeks, and every day, "You need to exercise. You're fat." He kept saying this again and again and again. And when he was stopped by the mother, and by the way, that I'm not pretending that friend is me or something. It's literally a different person, not me. Then when their mom called out, "Hey, why are you doing this again and again?" He's like, "No, but it is true. I'm not lying. It's the fact. Look at her, or or weigh her, or whatever." And what's the point here? You can't just keep going on and on about it. And of course, the person was not a student of Hatha Yoga, but this is common sense. I mean, you don't need to actually come to a school and study this in a structured manner. You know what you're trying to do. You know you're hurting the other person, but you want to continue it because, hey, it is honesty. That's not what we want to do. We'll continue with the book again. Enough of me. Back to Soul Book, because in this, Master has actually put this as a separate topic, balancing the virtue of honesty and non-lying with loving kindness and non-injury. What you call truth may be partially true, and if you express it, the result may be disastrous. Okay, he's really going for the extreme. Let us say that okay, I'll click over this example. Revealing the information that can cause tremendous emotional and physical injury is probably not the best idea. A yogi who is intelligent would think, if I were to say this, I would cause tremendous damage to the person. That would be unkind. So let me take the kind way out. One should not use honesty out of malice or as a tool or weapon to cause emotional pain or injury. This is misusing the virtue of honesty. If there's a conflict between the two, loving kindness and non injury should prevail. Okay. Now, there's a there's a discussion on truth, which I would like you guys to actually pay attention to. Just give me a minute. Different book. Okay. Lotus Sutras, Compassionate Objectivity. Okay. Lying distorts the mental perception, the inner perception of other people. This is the karmic fruit of what is the karmic fruit of this? Your own perception will be distorted. Why? Because the person has mentally blinded and distorted the perception of others. Truth is like a jewel. Yeah, this is what I wanted to pick up. Truth is like a jewel, like a diamond. It has many facets. If you look at only one side, you will not see the whole picture. What you see depends on how you look at it. A word is like a finger pointing at different things. Do not look at the finger, focus on the essence of the word. Focus on what the finger is pointing at. Truth has many levels. Fanatical or dangerous people believe their opinion is the only truth. In reality, truth is dynamic. It is like water or air. It should be made available to people who are ready. When people are ready, truth is revealed piece by piece. Truth is simple, but it is not obvious to common people. Question everything, but do it politely. Truth is based on validation and not emotion. It is honesty in an harmless way. Okay. The key thing which I wanted to point out here is the fact that truth has many facets. Again, a non-binary approach. A lot of times when we get in a situation where we are confronted with what we believe are facts, we don't look at other facts. And different people see things differently. And this is what Master Choa is pointing at, that we don't need to believe that people who are fanatic, they will believe their version of truth is only truth. And when they get into a discussion and an argument, typically it goes like, you are not telling the truth or you are lying. One beautiful way I saw this was in, I forget somebody's autobiography, but when he did not agree with the person, that guy would go, it's something to do with sports. Just not can't recall the exact guy. But he would say that whenever there is a confrontation or wherever there was a disagreement, he always refused to go in with a position saying that you are wrong. The position that he took, which was beautiful, was I see it differently. He will always start the discussion with I see it differently. And that would always avoid so many problems. It is never hurtful. It always makes the other person think you are never getting personal and telling the other person that he is wrong or he or she is wrong. And that when I read that, I was like, hey, this is so much in accordance with the teachings. And again, common sense. I do not know the guy personally, but I think he's one of the Formula One guys, and he is up, I don't think into Adhatik Yoga or Pranic Healing, but very simple way of actually doing this. And I used that. I really liked it. So I actually used it in a lot of situations at my work. And it's so easy to have discussions and to have even difference of opinions because you call it that. It's a different, I just see it in a different manner. A lot of times you get pushbacks or you will feel like your way of seeing is wrong. People can go at that extreme as well, but it always leaves room for interpretation, and it always, and there's a level of humility in it when we actually do that, that look, I am seeing things a particular way, but I am acknowledging the fact that that may not be the only way things can be seen. And if you're seeing it differently, then yes, we can talk about it and we can have a discussion. We may still not agree, that's fine. But at that point, I am not using the virtue of honesty as a weapon and telling the other person, you are wrong, don't do this, don't do that, or and that is why whenever we are practicing the virtue of honesty online, non-lying, we absolutely must take care of this because there is a tendency of being fanatic about that. The other thing that we looked at was we need to practice a mature form of honesty. A mature form of honesty, again, allows us to be flexible. Again, it's not an excuse to be untruthful. It's not an excuse to lie. And if you think the lies which are absolutely discouraged are malicious lies, lies which can actually harm other people, false information, gossiping. But a lot of us don't actually do that. or don't do that intentionally, or don't do it a lot. Sometimes you may end up doing it. We're all humans. What we end up doing is telling trivial lies out of convenience. Now, this is something, unfortunately, I do a lot, or I used to do a lot, purely out of convenience. Are you busy? Yes, I'm busy. Why? Because I just don't want to have a conversation, or I want to be left alone. It's easy. Or I don't want to explain. For example, if I actually did that yesterday. So yesterday I had to travel for work. I was in Oxford. I was going from train station to a client's office. This was too much detail. Then my father called me at that time and he said, "What are you doing?" All I said was, "I'm going to work." I thought, hey, I'm not lying. And they're like, "Oh, you're going to your office, so which tube station?" And instead of telling the truth out of convenience, as I said, no, I just told them Liverpool Street. I was nowhere near Liverpool Street. But I knew my father that if I tell him I'm in Oxford, then he's going to ask me 10 other questions to understand the geography of the whole thing, to understand the train timings and how weather is, how buildings are, talk about Oxford University or whatever. And I wanted to avoid that those 20 questions and conversations, and I lied. I just didn't. And at the end of it, I knew that today we are going to talk about this. So I was embarrassed. I was like, okay, tomorrow we're going to talk about honesty and non-lying. And I picked convenience and I lied. And while it's not a big deal, it's not a malicious lie, it did not harm anybody. It saved me some time, avoided any irritation that I might have experienced at that time, and it didn't matter. But then I was thinking, at the end of the day, we are pranic healers. We talk about energy. Truth is an energy, falsehood is an energy, and there's absolutely no need for me to create that energy. There's zero requirement for that. And that's where I think trivial lies are absolutely pointless. If you don't need to lie, sometimes you have to, I completely get that. But if you don't need to, then just break the pattern. If we get ourselves into a habit that I will not lie, and I was very proud of my first response when I said I'm going to work, no details, but no lies. But I mean, being smart is good, but it's not the most helpful thing. And what we are trying to practice here is remove the vice. We are practicing character building, because if I do not remove that, when I go home, when I meditate, when I do good things, when I'm showered with good blessings and energy, the seeds of falsehood will get fertilized. I don't want that to happen. So it is in my interest to actively remove that. Okay. I hope that makes sense. Okay. All right. On that note, we'll take a pause today. There is a lot more to discuss, but we will continue it next week. Next week, we will focus a lot more on accurate perception and correct expression. The second part of the virtue, which I genuinely believe the most important part of the virtue, because it tells us what's right and what's not, and gives us a framework to actually look at that. Okay. So if you'll get ready for meditation. Yeah, Gail, please go on.
So one of the things that Bob and I try and practice about talking, avoiding gossip, and not lying is I think there are 5 questions, but we very rarely get past the first 3. Which the first one you ask is it true? And of course, you don't know most of the time, is it true? Because it's something you've heard. Then the second is one of the killer ones is it necessary?
Yeah.
And then if it's true and it's necessary, is it kind?
Yeah.
And as I said, there's 2 more, but normally we get stopped at is it necessary?
I've come across that framework as well, and it's beautiful. If we can actually take a pause and do exactly what you said, just ask ourselves these 3 questions. But I think a lot of us live in a situation where there are, okay, this is my opinion, not from the books, disclaimer. So we live in a situations where we have this urge to speak, maybe sometime to fill the silence. Maybe we are a little worried, a little insecure, and we believe we need to just add to that. Gossiping and getting into, especially talking bad about a common person, is one of the easiest ways to bond with other people. And sometimes it becomes difficult to let go of that opportunity, especially when we are not feeling too good about ourselves. That, okay, I want approval, I want somebody's friendship, or I want to be part of the group. I don't want to stay aloof or whatever. So you just join in, and you're right. At that point, we forget to ask ourselves these questions, because most of the times you're right. It's the whole thing. Is it necessary? That one kills everything. There is no need. So I actually love that framework. So thank you for pointing that out. Okay, as I said, we can talk about this topic for so much. But Roxanne, Pradeep, do you guys have anything to add? Anything comes to your mind? No? Okay. On that note, we I had more plans today, but we started late, so we'll get on with the meditation. Okay, if you can prepare yourself, just let me know if you can hear it.